Everything you're about to hear is just my assessment. It's my opinion, and not to be taken as fact.
Anyway, I was showing Theo, he was riding with me, and I said, you want me to make a sermon out of that stop sign? So did I?
Yes, you did.
And then I said, you want me to make a sermon out of that mailbox? And did I?
Yes, sir.
And then I said, you want me to make a sermon out of that evergreen tree right there?
Yes, sir.
And I just kept going, right? That's the way Jesus taught.
Here's a thorough and condemning assessment on this incident, a display of power and fear. Rod Parsley's disturbing grip on Theo. The image of Rod Parsley gripping the throat of a young man named Theo is nothing short of disturbing. This is not the gesture of a mentor guiding a student or a leader encouraging his follower. This is the posture of control, domination, and intimidation. The way his hand is wrapped around Theo's neck, particularly the placement of his thumb, suggests an abusive power dynamic. It is a visual representation of the kind of coercion that has likely been going on behind closed doors at World Harvest Church for years. Theo's face says it all. He does not look relaxed. He does not look engaged in a friendly or light-hearted conversation. Instead, he looks like a man who knows he has no choice but to comply. He appears visibly uncomfortable, likely understanding that any misstep, any hesitation, any deviation from the script could lead to serious consequences. And if Rod Parsley is willing to put his hands on someone like this in front of a congregation and a camera, one has to ask, what does he do in private when there are no witnesses? The scripted lie, forced compliance under pressure. The exchange between Rod Parsley and Theo is equally alarming. The conversation is not organic. It is a performance. Theo's responses feel robotic, as though he knows he has to say the right words or face the consequences. Rod asks, do you want me to make a sermon out of that stop sign? Theo, yes, you did. Rod asks again, this time about a mailbox. Theo, yes, sir. Rod, and then I said, do you want me to make a sermon out of that evergreen tree right there? Theo, yes, sir. Notice the wording. Theo is not giving spontaneous, personal answers. He is reciting a script, repeating rehearsed affirmations that serve to bolster Rod Parsley's self-aggrandizing display. This is not a conversation. This is an interrogation masquerading as spiritual leadership. The way Theo automatically responds, yes, sir, repeatedly hints at something deeper. Habitual subservience, possibly drilled into him by an environment where questioning authority is simply not an option. The repetition of yes, sir suggests he is conditioned to immediately affirm whatever Rod Parsley says, regardless of whether it is true or not. This is the behavior of someone who understands that the only safe path is total compliance. The intimidation tactic, a public lesson in power. What makes this even worse is that it was done in front of an audience. Rod Parsley didn't just put his hands on Theo in private. He did it on stage, in front of a congregation, and on a live stream broadcast. Why? Because abusers often use public displays of dominance to reinforce their control. This wasn't just about Theo. This was about sending a message to everyone else watching. The message is clear. You see this? You don't question me. You obey. You affirm me. You submit. By putting his hand around Theo's throat, Rod Parsley made it clear that he is in control, and the congregation saw it happen. What was their reaction? Did they gasp? Did they feel uneasy? Or have they been so conditioned by years of spiritual manipulation that they saw nothing wrong? If this were any other setting, a workplace, a school, even a family gathering, this act would be called what it is: harassment, intimidation, and abuse. But because it happens within the church, people are expected to excuse it. They are expected to look past the optics of a powerful man, gripping a younger man's throat while forcing him to affirm his teachings. The cult-like obedience, enforced loyalty in World Harvest Church. The fact that Theo likely knew he had no choice but to play along speaks volumes about the culture inside World Harvest Church. Many organizations that revolve around a powerful leader create an environment where questioning that leader is seen as rebellion, and rebellion is punished, socially, spiritually, or even financially. Theo was likely not free to answer differently. Could he have said, no, actually, you didn't make a sermon out of that? Of course not. That would have been seen as undermining Rod Parsley's authority. It would have been viewed as an act of disloyalty. The consequences of such an act could range from public rebuke to being ostracized or even dismissed from whatever role he holds within the church. This kind of forced agreement is what allows spiritual manipulation to thrive. It ensures that no one ever contradicts the leader, that no one ever challenges the narrative, and in doing so, it breeds a congregation of silent enablers, people who see abuse and control but feel powerless to stop it because they, too, have been conditioned to submit. The psychological toll. What this means for Theo and others like him. We must also consider the psychological effects this kind of control has on those subjected to it. What happens to someone like Theo, who has to constantly suppress his own thoughts and feelings to maintain his standing in this organization? Living under the rule of an overbearing leader like Rod Parsley can create deep-seated anxiety, self-doubt, and fear. When a person is forced to constantly affirm things they don't truly believe, they begin to lose their sense of self. They learn to ignore their instincts, to override their conscience, to prioritize the leader's narrative over their own truth. And this doesn't just go away when they leave. Many former members of churches like World Harvest carry spiritual trauma with them for years, struggling to rebuild their confidence, to learn how to think independently again. The bigger picture, a pattern of spiritual and psychological abuse. This is just one instance captured on camera, but it is emblematic of a larger pattern of control and manipulation within Rod Parsley's ministry. Over the years, many former members have come forward with stories of coercion, financial exploitation, and spiritual abuse under Parsley's leadership. The physical act of gripping someone's throat is not an isolated incident. It is a symbol of a broader culture of control that has been festering for years. Whether it's controlling people's finances through manipulative tithing tactics, controlling their spiritual beliefs through fear-based preaching, or controlling their personal lives through a culture of unquestioning loyalty, Rod Parsley's ministry thrives on dominance. Final verdict: a dangerous leader who needs to be held accountable. Rod Parsley's actions in this image are deeply troubling and indicative of a larger pattern of authoritarian control. His grip on Theo's throat is not just physical, it is symbolic of the spiritual, psychological, and emotional chokehold he maintains over his followers. This should not be ignored. This should not be excused. And this should not be allowed to continue. No spiritual leader should ever put their hands on someone in this manner. No church should ever tolerate this kind of behavior, and no one should ever have to live in fear of answering a question honestly. This is a textbook example of spiritual abuse. It's time for people to start recognizing it as such.